This is the School Board Policy Committee meeting, October 17th, 2017. Welcome, everybody. Has the meeting been properly posted, Joe?
It has.
It has been? Okay, thank you. And I see no citizens out there wishing to speak with us, so we will pass on that. We have minutes, excuse me, from our, that would be our September meeting, if I can get them. Here they are. Any motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Barbara, seconded by Greg. Any questions or changes to the minutes from September? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that passes. As you looked at our list, I'm sure you thought, wow. We have 21 policies on this list. This has been received from Neola. I've confirmed with Joe that these are policies that are really not controversial. They are just what the government is telling us we have to do. We can't change them. I don't think, the only thing we could do is probably add to them if we chose to, right?
We could expand on them if we wanted to. And we did, within some of these policies, have some choices just based off of how our district is operated. When we get down to family medical leave, you'll see what options we selected as a district, but most of the language in front of you tonight is either a federal or a state or need to make this adjustment so you remain compliant.
So that, like I said, is not very controversial material tonight. Then after that, we do have a couple left over that were, yes, Joe?
Just real quick, with respect to the materials that the attorneys have
Yes.
essentially drafted, I guess I'm asking Joe, if we are ever at a point where we're potentially going to void the warranty that we have with Neola, would you kind of raise a flag and say, hey, if we go down the road of changing this, Neola's not going to stand behind it?
Correct. And so there's two levels on that. If some of the policies that you see in front of you, FMLA for one, it's the federal government, Neola's attorney's interpretation passed to us for policy. Those are the ones that you need to make sure that you've adopted the appropriate language. There are other ones that are Neola recommended policies. And I'm not seeing any on the list. This wouldn't be one of the lists, but they do have a protection. They will support us if we take their policy and, adopt it as they're making the recommendation for. So that would also be a situation where we could potentially void the warranty on that policy.
And I just want us to be conscious if we do, we might feel that we really want to change a policy and we want to override what's been recommended by the Neola attorneys, and that's fine. But I just want us to enter into that in an understanding that. So if you could just bring to our attention if we're gonna ever do that,
I will do that.
I'd appreciate it.
That's a very good point. We haven't gotten to any of that, but that's a good point, yeah.
Question, please.
Barbara?
Joe, so we will be involved with Neola indefinitely?
As long as we want to maintain the contract, absolutely.
Okay, and so I'm assuming there's a fee every year?
There is an annual fee, yes.
Okay,
Somewhere in the, I think, $2,500 to $2,600 range, and that provides us with the two. So you got part of an update here. So it provides us with 2 updates a year. It provides us any emergency updates. So for instance, if there's a legislative change, Neola will get us updated policy language if it's required. And with each of these packets, we do have a meeting with Richard Zimmern from Neola. He comes in, goes over the policy language that Neola is presenting. He refers back to what we have currently adopted, so what's on our books. We make any necessary adjustments, and then after that meeting, I meet with one of the appropriate representatives from the departments. So for instance, if it's a business issue, I might meet with Darren and Sherry Stack. If it's HR, Chris, maybe Melissa Beck would be there. So that those policies get looked at, me and Lynn and then Richard Zimmern, and then they go through another layer of Waukesha eyes with the appropriate administration, and then they come to committee for review.
It would appear to me that our policies are pretty good because we really had minor changes.
After we did the revision in February,
Yeah.
I don't want to say we had a reset because we carried over a lot of Waukesha policy into what we did.
Right.
But we did have a reset, a point in time where everything became current at once. And then after that, it is minor word adjustments and such.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have, like I said, 21 of these. We don't have to go through and read all of them, but we can have a synopsis, and I think you can actually walk us through that, Joe.
Sure.
And you actually have the majority of it in this longer document that you received in your packet, which starts with Wisconsin overview and comments. And the comments kind of just say what was dealt with.
Correct.
And
this
I
is-
think to be fair, we should go, just have a,
Yep. The document, it's about a 4 or 5 page document. This is the Cliff Notes version of what the policies are. And so, to use this as a point of reference, this would be where an executive summary language would be coming from. This is the explanation of why and what is changed. If we do go through policy by policy packet, I don't know how you want to approach each one.
I would think you would just start with this.
Okay.
And then, everybody's got the policies, and then you probably have them in that order, starting with 0100.
Sure. So
And
from
if you have any questions on something on there, then you can certainly bring it up. I know I have at least one of those, I'm not, but we'll get to that.
So policy 0100, the recommended update is just a more clear definition of law enforcement officer or agencies. This definition now includes local, state, federal law enforcement agencies, so it just makes it clear. And these would start on the back of the second page of the packet is where I've.
Now, this actually is one where I did, in my own reading, have a question. That is on the back of the second page. We also made some changes. We capitalized medical advisor. Is that one of those changes we're just allowed to make as a,
Correct.
and if later on you'll talk about technical changes?
There's a policy that allows us to make technical changes to a policy. So if we notice that something has a grammar error, we can do that. If the title of a position, so say teaching and learning, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning changes to a different name, we're then able to go into the policy and just make that name change. In this situation, medical advisor is something that we can just make the change to and then notify the board that this technical change had been made to policy. But since this policy is being entertained, and you can see the correction, we didn't bother to send out a memo.
Right.
It's going in front of committee.
Now, I do have a question on the next page, under voting. Law requires the board members must be present in order to have their vote officially recorded, be available, roll call vote, board's presence at a meeting includes. And then it goes on to talk about attending by telephone. And I think that the way we have acted on that in the past is you can attend by telephone, but you can't vote. Is that the way this is reading? I think that's what we've been,
Yeah, that's been our
that's
practice.
been our practice, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think this violates that. I just wanted to be comfortable with that.
And that's the next section there. Trying to remember what our conversation was back not this past summer, but the summer before, when this language came out. So the voting piece there's, outside of Board of Education being changed to board,
Right.
there's no change to this.
Okay, then this must have been, at that time, you're right, 18 months ago, or whenever it was, we deemed it to be in concert with the way we've been behaving.
Correct.
Okay. I got a little nervous when I read about we've never taken any votes remotely.
No.
And I guess that's what the proxy thing's about, too.
And it does defer to state laws, so if there's clarification on what type of vote, again, I don't know, but perhaps there's a certain type of vote that needs to be had around the budget, or some of the bigger things, then a remote vote might not work, but a vote on a policy update may work if that's the case. So I think where state law, this defers to state law, so where state law would allow a telephone vote is what this policy, or what this bylaw allows for. And I can seek further clarification if you'd like.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I would like to understand what that is, because if the state law says X, then a board member could actually say, hey, I want to follow what the statute says. And our practice, as Bill pointed out, is
Has been no remote votes.
yeah, you have to be present to vote, period,
So
with
maybe,
this
Right.
board.
maybe we can just validate that.
We'll look into that.
Good. Hope that's my last question.
That's a good point.
Okay. 0131.1 legislative. Joe?
Yep, so this, if you were to go down to the.
Well, that's the
order-
technical corrections one, by the way.
This is a, yeah, so policies of the board shall be included in the board policy manual. And then the technical corrections, this is the statement that we spoke about earlier, to policy language or construction that do not reflect a policy decision or substantive consideration by the board, such as a correction to a typographical or grammatical error, inclusion, correction of statutory citation, renumbering of sections, combining of policies or similar actions. So this again is the more technical aspect that would come to the board in a memo form, but would not necessarily require a board vote.
Joe?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think that makes things more efficient. But I do think it is critical that we understand what those changes are in a timely manner,
Absolutely.
especially if we get a call. I mean, we don't ever want to be surprised with
No.
anything new. And I don't think these types of changes are going to be substantive at all, so.
We are on the side of bringing everything to the board. I mean, that's been our practice. But I don't know if you guys want to see a spell, if we notice
I
a
mean,
grammar error.
sometimes there's a period or a comma or, there isn't a space here, and even some of the things like a name change in a,
You can let us know by
Yeah.
a memo type of a thing. We don't even have to bring it up. if-
Friday packet kind of thing, yeah.
Friday updates would be where this,
that would
these
be-
changes would
That would be
go.
enough, yeah. Okay. 01441.1 on compensation.
Yeah, so the second paragraph, unless the member has provided a timely annual notice of refusal to accept the salary, notice must be provided prior to taking the oath of office and performing any service for the initial year of election or appointment, and may be renewed for subsequent years by notice at least 30 days prior to the member's taxable year unless statutory exceptions apply. So this is if you, as a board member or any of our board members, would like to refuse the salary.
If that ever happened, okay. 0164.1, regular meetings revised. And, well, these are, 0610.
So again, you can see two statements there. One is red, struck through, the other one is underlined in green. Special meetings of the board may be called by the president or by the written request of a majority of the members of the board, provided there is compliance with the notice provision of these bylaws and state law. So it makes the process, I believe, a little bit simpler,
Yeah.
given what used to be there. But again, it's a one-sentence policy for a one-sentence policy.
0166, the agenda.
The agenda, so if you
Oh,
look.
back page.
If you look on the back page there, in what looks like the first full paragraph, second sentence, generally the agenda and supporting materials. So they have just clarified that supporting materials are,
Are delivered,
yes.
yeah. And this would be a policy that, for the first part of this is our agenda, so that's custom to us, but that sentence has just been added to it.
Yep.
Or that, those 3 or 4 words.
Wisconsin statute citation.
Yeah. yes?
I mean, there have been times where supporting materials have not been distributed, and we have items distributed at the meeting itself, just due to timing. You know, administration needs more timing. Are we breaking our own policy in those scenarios, or?
There is the ability to disseminate material, and I'd have to find it in this policy, but at the time of the meeting, as long as board members are noticed that there is updated material at the table. And so I apologize for not having that at hand, but I'm just looking for the language in here, I apologize.
Stuff about 24 hours or less. That's noticed, never mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like an emergency. Every once in a while, we've needed an emergency.
But sometimes supporting materials are not intentionally not delivered in advance.
Well, like, for example, look at the technology packet this weekend. Really, all the materials were, right, they were all distributed at the meeting.
Unless the materials, the way I understand this, the agenda needs to be current for items that are discussed and information that's presented. The supporting materials, and I can seek clarification on this.
Kind of like option, those are like,
Yeah, I mean, there could be additional supporting materials, so I'm thinking of how the HR committee, the HR meeting is posted prior to the board meeting. But oftentimes, as part of the consent agenda, there are additional items that are at the table based off of the actions of that committee. And I don't believe that there's anything that would be against policy in doing that, because the agenda was the current agenda. And the supplemental materials are for your review and consideration at the meeting. But I will seek clarification
Yeah,
on
let's
this.
do that. I can't believe we're doing anything wrong, because it's always worked so nicely. It's not trying to hide anything when
Right.
you.
No.
And sometimes it's confidential information that should not be discussed until we get into the closed session.
Correct.
Okay, where did that leave me off? 1630.01, Family Medical Leave Act revised, and that is 3 different policies, because we have it for the staff, administration, professional staff, and support staff. So it's basically the same wording in three of these, Joe.
Except
Correct.
the last page
What's the last page?
of one of them. Let's see. It's this one.
I don't see what's wrong.
The citation, so National Defense Authorization Act of 2010, under professional staff, that got cut off in the copy.
Oh,
So the citations are off. However, the policy language is essentially the same. And then what I would add is, within the policy, the update through all these policies is the same update to consider. So if you were to look at support staff, professional staff, and administration, you'll notice that the language was updated from you, which is struck through in red, to staff member, just to be more clear, not to use the word, not to reference you in the policy, but
Right,
to
a
reference a
staff
staff
me-
member. And then if you look at the bottom of the back of the first page, you'll notice that we designated calendar year. This is with current practice, so this is how we've operated. You'll see the green box by calendar year, last paragraph, amount of leave available. And then you'll see some that is struck through. The areas with strike through were options that we did not consider. Those would be cleaned up then when the policy is polished. And then it picks up again, for any reason stated above, with the exception of leave care for an injured service member, which is provided as described in F above. And then we did select the option spouses who are both employed by the district. So if we have a husband and wife, for instance, just using that as an example, who are employed by the district, they may take a combined total of 12 weeks of leave for the birth or placement of a child for adoption or foster care. And that is consistent with current practice
And law.
and law. We have the authority to do it under law, yes.
Is there a reason why we chose calendar year versus fiscal year for this?
It's just how it's been. Calendar year is how it's been approached.
Okay.
I spoke with Chris and Melissa Beck, and going back, for as long as they can remember, we've always looked at this on a calendar year basis.
But would it make it easier if it was on a fiscal year?
I believe that they've discussed that, and I don't know if it makes much of a difference for them. Fiscal year, July 1 to June 30th, which would in essence line up with a school year.
Right.
That,
It's also a tax year this way, personal tax, income tax.
It
yeah,
would
this does
make it-
line up with taxes.
Yes.
This would,
But,
calendar year.
but this also then, for instance, this, I don't know what it talks about for interruptions in work. I'd have to look into that a little bit more detail. But with summer break, if a baby came at the beginning of May and there's 6 weeks left in school, summer break then wouldn't count against
That's right.
the FMLA if you did it on a
That's
calendar
right.
year basis. And then that leave could pick up again in September.
That's right.
Because there's no days worked
Right.
in between there.
So we have a lot of babies born.
So I think that this
Same
language is a little
time.
bit more employee-friendly than if we were to look at it from
Right.
the fiscal
so.
year basis.
Fair enough, yeah.
So in essence, same language across all three employee groups.
Got printed wrong. Yeah. That was 1630, 3430, and 4430. Lost my place here. Here we are. Which gets us to 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal education employment opportunity.
What number is that, Bill? Oh, 2260.
2260.
Yeah, got it.
And so to be consistent with non-discriminatory practices, you'll see on the first page of this policy, we have to be explicit in what non-discrimination applies to. And so that's where you see items A through I.
These were given to us again. Used, right?
Correct. You can, if you were to look at the back of this packet, the last second copied page, you will see all of the legal citations that this policy keeps us in compliance with. You do see an investigation piece in here. That language comes or ties to non-discrimination language, follows those laid out timelines. And you can also see on the last page of the policy that it addresses the appeal process to the Department of Public Instruction.
Barbara?
Yes. Joe, why is the name of Chris Hedstrom and yourself listed here? I guess policy,
The district is required in policy to list the name
The
of the
name.
individuals who are responsible for investigations.
Really?
So Chris, being a female administrator, me being a male administrator, gives the person who is feels that they've been discriminated against the option to pick a male or a female
Okay.
person to work with.
okay, but I didn't know that.
And you will see, we are listed in probably a dozen policies
Interesting.
by name.
But
So
this is, we've never done this before. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue, but,
This is what the law requires, that we're listed by
Interesting.
name for person's reference.
great.
Just real quick on page 1, item D, we're looking at, one of the non-discriminatory practices, administration of gifts, bequests, scholarships, and other aids, benefits, or services to students from private agencies or organizations or persons. A lot of times, gifts are given to us by individuals specifying exactly where they want to go. PTOs or PTAs specify how they want gifts to be spent or used. So I'm reading this and I'm going, are we really able to fully comply with that?
Well, I go back up to that opening statement on top there. The policy is intended to support and promote non-discriminatory practices in all districts and school activities, particularly in the following areas. So it's not that if I want to donate $5,000 to such and such a program, is the district allowing access for all to that program so they could benefit from the gift? So it's not where the money is designated so much as it is who has access to the program that money is benefiting. $5,000 donation, I think there was some fundraising done, for instance, around the football fields, the soccer fields, the turf. Do we allow everybody to have access to the sports that utilize that turf? And if the answer to that question is yes, then we have, we're in compliance with this.
Sure, okay. Thanks, thank you for that clarification.
2261.01, parent and family engagement in Title I programs.
We do have district-sponsored clubs and activities.
That's
As
really
far
what
as
it's-
things that we're entertaining this evening. 2430?
Yeah. I lost my place here.
Okay.
There was, on this sheet here, you had a 2261.01.
Yeah, but we have we're working, we did not include all.
That's
of
not on here.
Correct. We did not include all policies from the update.
Right, right.
For consideration tonight.
That's
We'll be
right. We have a
bringing-
couple that we're studying.
Yep.
So now we're on 2430, district-sponsored clubs and activities. I got to put that aside, the other one, yeah. Okay. Urges all students, okay.
Again, this is more of an access point, more of an encouragement piece. I mean, the addition to this policy is as stated. We want to encourage participation from all students.
Any problems? Okay, back to the right list here. Scholastic activities. Like the wording is probably going to be the same there too, huh?
We had to, by recommendation, add the non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity language to this policy. Again, to make sure that the non-discrimination language is included by policy for athletics.
That statement on the front page, right?
Correct.
Okay. 54, then there's some more than this sheet that we didn't address, but we are moving to
On to grading.
Reading.
grading, 5421.
And the grading language, again, includes cross-references the non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity policy.
Right, the one we just referred to. Okay. And 2261.01. Whoops, it's back there now. Oh, I see that we just had these little in different order. Parent and family engagement in Title I programs. That's the one I was reading before.
Yes, we added the term "and families" to this.
Right.
And you'll see that involvement has been struck from policy language.
And family engagement, yeah.
And this, again, it's a requirement out of the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Federal Education Act.
Excuse
Go,
me.
yes.
How is family defined? Did we have that in our definitions? Like, there's a definitions to all of our
I don't believe that
policy and-
families is listed in our area of definition, but it expands parents to whomever the family
Like
unit would be.
guardians
Could be
and-
guardian, it could be, whoever is in charge of the child, foster Whoever is
Parents,
that,
okay.
that point of contact with the child.
Question. Okay, now, back to this one. 2411, school counseling, academic and career planning, revision to that.
Yes, with the new state academic and career planning initiative, I know that the Teaching and Learning Committee of the board has had a number of updates on this. ACP, as it's called, is something that is a state mandate. It goes back, it's to be in full implementation this year. We began exploring it as a district 2 school years ago, and we did a pilot with it last year. With ACP comes some additional policy language. So you'll see that the first strikeout is letter C, assist students in career awareness and planning in the selection of appropriate post-secondary educational opportunity. That is then replaced with the paragraph in green. Academic and career planning services include individualized support and access to software tools and staff assistance provided to grades 6 through 12, the mission, so it gets a little bit more. So it takes what was in point C and it expands it and it makes it more formal.
Will it be actually putting in, I'm just looking at the way it's laid out here, will that paragraph be put in right where C is?
No, that paragraph sits alone.
It's going to stand alone?
Paragraph, yes.
So they're going to renumber? That'll be a technical change, I suppose.
Yep, it'll be cleaned up,
Yeah.
but you'll see it, C will be out and then D will move up to C.
Yeah, got it.
Question.
Yes, Barbara.
Joe, this one, we're talking about school counseling, correct?
Yep.
How is this accomplished at the elementary level? Because I know we don't have a counselor per building. In fact, is it still true that one counselor is for 4 buildings maybe? Or 5
We have
buildings?
2 elementary guidance counselors that cover the 14 locations.
Wow.
But we now have all of our elementary schools staffed with a full-time psychologist or social worker to take the social and emotional learning piece that much farther. So in the last 2 years, I would say when I arrived here, we had rotating staff that
Yeah,
worked at the elementary
did.
levels, probably similar to what you had experienced when you
Yes,
were a principal
yes.
when the counselors were removed. We have added back that level of FTE with psychs and social workers.
Beautiful.
So that has been built back in. But from a formal guidance counselor or school counselor role, we have 2 working at the elementary school. And then if my math is right, we have 17 working at the secondary level. And this policy applies to what goes on at the
Okay,
secondary level.
but really, we have social workers and psychologists every day in a school? They're assigned to.
One or the other, yes.
One or
yes.
the other?
So I believe-
Wow, that's great.
Of the 14 locations, we have 10 psychologists working, 9 psychologists and 5 social workers.
Oh, that's great.
So
Joe?
Just an observation, in the green, or the paragraph where it's green, the second sentence, mission of academic and career planning is to provide comprehensive plan which will be developed and maintained by a student. What I like, actually, I mean, and this is being driven by a statute, right?
this is
This
state,
change?
yep.
What I actually really like, I don't always find myself agreeing with state statutes, especially when mandates are put on us, and, but in this case, I really like the responsibility falling upon the student. I mean, this is his or her life, and that's really where it belongs, as opposed to having it actually fall upon us. Now, we're guiding them and we're providing them with the environment and the learning experience, obviously, to develop that. But I really do think that those are some key words here, and I'm glad to see that. So,
Greg?
They are, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been the past few years where you've seen school districts drop the guidance counselor piece, and it's school counselor, because it goes, the role of the counselor goes, we used to think a counselor would help us get ready for either entering the workforce, the military, or college. And their role has expanded much more beyond that, being there to support students, to facilitate communication with parents, to intervene, when there are social issues going on with a student. So their role has gotten a lot broader than what it used to be.
Okay.
Okay.
I gotta see if I'm following this on, that was 5610, suspension and expulsion.
So this provides language, this actually captures better what we do
Yes, it
as a
does.
school district.
I noted that myself.
This brings in the early reinstatement language
Yes.
that we've used as a district. And it also clarifies what we need to do by policy if a student were to ever bring a firearm to school. So this is what the additional language is.
Joe?
Real quick, going to the paragraph that talks about a firearm possession of a student. Let's see if I can, it was easier when so just, you see where the red line is? The paragraph above the red line, we're talking about expel a student from the school for not less than 1 year. And I'm focusing on the 1 year. What I'm not sure is where we reference a statute down below 18, the United States statute. Does that include everything above that? So is the 1 year defined by the United States statute?
It is,
Okay.
it is.
I didn't know if that was just referring to the definition of possessed firearm, or if the whole,
It applies just to that paragraph there,
okay,
where it's talking about the possession of a firearm while at school.
okay,
And
so
this
that
goes-
is defined at the federal government.
This does, it goes back to the post-Columbine language that came up. You saw a lot of zero tolerance policies, really zero tolerance policies around major discipline. And we talked about that a couple months back when we had our work session on discipline. Since then, the zero tolerance has dropped off with the exception of having a firearm at school. So
There's
the
an
board of
unless
the district has a lot of authority.
Had you had an opportunity to participate?
There's an
in it?
unless statement there that says, it does give you the opportunity to shorten it if you need to,
Yeah, it's tough to do.
right after the policy.
That's
nu-
right.
Right after the statute
It.
number. Okay? Which gets me to 5111, eligibility, and here we have a group of them. 5111, 8320, 8330, 8350, all deal with the same language change.
It does. There has been some recent language that's been provided, and it's called the Safe at Home program. It was described to me as not the same, but just kind of for a framework, like a witness protection type situation where if there's somebody who is in our district and there is involvement from an agency that places them in Waukesha, we're not to question address or anything like that. They're here under the Safe at Home program, and there's good reason why they're categorized as safe at home. So generally, fleeing abusive situations and such. And you'll notice that then in eligibility of resident, non-resident students, personnel records, student records, confidentiality.
Now, those are the only changes in all, that is, let me rephrase that. That is the only change made in each of these?
Yes. Oh, and then, yes, I'm sorry. Expulsion is also the first policy that we spoke of, eligibility of resident and non-resident students. I'd like to draw your attention to item N. Any student that has been expelled from another school district or district and seeks to enroll in the district during the term of their expulsion order shall be considered for enrollment as follows. Item 1, point 1, if the student has been expelled from another Wisconsin public school district, the student is not entitled to enroll. So just to be clear about that, in the event that the superintendent intends to enroll a student during the term of an expulsion order issued by another Wisconsin public school district, the board must approve that enrollment. And the reason for that is, as an administrator, I can't overrule the decision of a board. But a board could take action against, not against, but counter to what the other board did. So if a student was applying here who was expelled from another school district, and we were to consider that order as an expelled student, you as a board would have to approve that student. The other point then, if the student has been expelled by a public school in another state or by a Wisconsin charter school, the superintendent may choose to enroll the student, but if the superintendent does not intend to enroll the student, the board must determine that the conduct giving rise to expulsion would have been grounds for an expulsion here. So again, the superintendent or designee does not have the authority to implement an expulsion if one did not happen in a Wisconsin public school. So that would have to come to the board as well.
Okay, thank you for catching that. Greg?
What kind of communication, Joe, exists from district to district so that we would know that ahead of time?
We get the exchange of records that goes from one school district to another would include an expulsion order. The behavioral file is sent to us, so we would have that's presented to us.
So it's the responsibility of this sending district?
And it's also on the open enrollment forms.
Okay.
The parents acknowledge if there was or was not an expulsion, and then when we do the records request, it is sent along by the district. Again, if you remember back to that, the discipline presentation, we talked about the Wisconsin student number. You know, that number ties the kid to the last school district, and that's then where we could get the record. So if the parent goes homeschool and then tries to get in, we still have
Yeah.
access to those educational records.
Joe?
But once a student fulfills an expulsion order, you don't have to bring that forth to us. You could just admit the student, right?
We could, or we could also apply, the expulsion order is good, I think it's for two years after. So if I was expelled from school in 2015-16 school year, that expulsion still hangs over my head through open enrollment for 2 years following the expulsion. And we see this a lot with eAchieve. We get a lot of online requests for eAchieve, so.
But do we take them in eAchieve?
It's treated on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Generally, no, we don't take them because of the nature of the offense,
Yeah.
but we do see a number, probably about 40 applications a year.
Okay, couple more. 8452 on automated external defibrillators.
We spoke back a while ago about that AEDs needed to be discussed in the health curriculum. This just ties the language, the curriculum language to the AED policy. It also takes and formalizes the term medical advisor.
Specifically says grades 7 through 12 as opposed to students will. Oh, it
Correct.
does say high school in there, in the old one. And now we're in middle school.
Yep.
Or partially in middle school. And last, 8800, religious and patriotic ceremonies and observances.
So again, this policy comes from some language, again, around non-discrimination. So the old statement in there, the district shall not function as a disseminating agent for any person or outside agency for any religious or anti-religious document, book, et cetera. And so that policy language needed to be updated. Distribution of any outside organizational's material, including a request by any person wishing to facilitate dissemination. They may make a request in accordance with policy, but that, again, it comes down to the superintendent's decision. So the old policy language prevented them from making a request. We have to allow them to make a request, and then that request can be vetted by the superintendent, which you saw in that other policy language, so.
Greg?
Joe, what's your interpretation at the last paragraph on the first page? Every school in the district shall offer the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem?
We
What does
have,
that mean to offer?
The school should be doing the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. That is what the expectation is, or was at some point throughout the school day, there should be a Pledge of Allegiance. Students, and we ran this by our attorneys a year or two ago, students do not have to participate in the
Right.
pledge.
Right.
However, they cannot be disruptive during the pledge. So student chooses not to participate in the pledge, they remain seated in their desk and quiet. So you can't make them participate in the pledge, but they cannot be disruptive during that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That was 21 policies that we will be bringing forward. Well, it's an action item, so the intent is to bring these forward at the next board meeting if we have an approval by this committee of taking it to the board meeting. So is there a motion for approval of what we have on those? I'm not going to read all 21 policy numbers. Approval for those that they may be forwarded for the first reading in the November board meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Joel, seconded by,
Second.
okay. Any further questions on any of these policies?
I'm glad you didn't make me read them all in my motion.
Yeah, you had to read them at home.
I would just add to that.
In the motion, yeah, that's right. Oh, I did.
For the full board's reference, we will be providing the language from this attached to an executive summary so that the full board then, when it's discussed, can be oriented to where those things are at. We just,
Thank you for saying that, because I've been sitting here for the last few minutes thinking, I think we need a bright pink letter from me to the board members to please read this stuff in advance.
Right.
Or I'll tell them that at the next board meeting. That's what I'll tell, then we'll send a letter. We need to. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn. That does bring us to, we have three, I think it's three.
Yes.
We have three policies, which we have had to the board for their first reading. And we want to just review those to see if there's anything else that needs to be dealt with, so that we will have the second reading and hopefully board approval in the November meeting. Now, one of these we do have a slight change on. I guess we would have to vote on that again, wouldn't we? The change we made on policy 3112 and 4112. We read it at the last board meeting, and we had a suggestion, which was to transpose the two sentences near the bottom, and I believe this is the new version, right? So the new version on that statement, which we were adding anyway, was to bring the employee handbook forward in the literature here. So all employee concerns should follow the procedure outlined in the employee handbook. Lynn, want to catch that? Yes. Okay. Further, all employees who engage board members with the intention of making disparaging, defamatory, and/or false or intentionally inaccurate statements targeted at their direct supervisor, administrator, or another employee will be subject to disciplinary action. That's the way it reads, and I think that's what Mr. O'Brien was trying to get across to us.
yes.
And
Accurate.
makes sense. So I will handle that one separately, because we do need to take action on that one. Yes, yeah, actually, we did have the old one attached to it as well, right?
Question.
Series.
Yeah, there's two here. Wait, just a minute. Lynn?
4112 are attached. We made the change in both.
Oh, that's what it is, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
It is
thank
two.
you.
Okay, Barbara?
Yes, under board staff communications, the very first sentence, 3112, the Board of Education has a legitimate interest in maintaining order by directing that employees communicate to the school board, move initially through the chain of command to the superintendent. You know, I talk to employees a lot, but that doesn't mean that it's out of order, does it? Or it does it?
It all depends on the nature of the conversation, which is outlined in points 1, 2, and 3. General conversation, we have a very close relationship as a district with our board. Board members are in our schools. Board members are parents of children in our schools. All of that regular day-to-day drop-in is fine. It's when we start getting into more specifics, which items 1, 2, and 3, points 1, 2, and 3 do for us. Those are the areas where those, like an employee concern, there's a chain of command that's outlined in the employee handbook. That's where those things should go for resolution, and that's what we've discussed, I believe, at the last 3 or
Yeah,
so
we have.
meetings.
Yeah, we have.
So
I still don't
this
like
is
it.
nothing to prevent social interaction. This is
Right.
nothing to prevent school, visits to schools. It is to provide some guidance on when concerns come up.
Well, what if a teacher would, you're visiting and she'd say, I got 35 kids this year? Well, is that inappropriate?
Statement of fact, they have 35.
Yeah, I mean, you can see when you go into the classroom.
It was interesting, last year, when Bonnie was retiring, we framed her first class list as an elementary teacher. 42. She had 42 kids
Sure.
in her class.
Absolutely.
So
Did.
Okay? Mr. Greg?
Are you looking for clarification on that, what that means?
I think it would be helpful.
So we have that beginning of social interaction, covers, that leaves that open to informally discuss such matters as blah, blah, blah. They're free to do that. They're not embargoed from doing that stuff.
So if it said something like, move initially through the chain of command as outlined below, or something like that? Is that what you're looking for, or is that what you're?
I don't think the chain of command is outlined below.
Isn't.
That's defined by our org chart, right? I mean, but these are like the exception, these are just the 3 areas that we want to really clarify. What are those topics that really should follow that chain of command? At least that's how I'm.
Well, then the next sentence on that paragraph, employees are expected to follow the established chain of communications as described in this policy. Bing, bing, bing. I don't see that we are stopping it.
Okay. What about EAW? 2 board members.
EAW
You
is an
know?
organization, as I understand it.
Yeah, but they're
EAW
employees.
EAW as a union organization is entitled to negotiate their base salary as an organization. Other employment type conditions, there are steps outlined in the employee handbook for employees to address their concerns.
I don't know, as I read that, it sounds like every communication needs to go through the chain of command. That's how I interpret it.
And me too. Has there been a problem?
Yeah, there was a problem this summer that came through some email. That was one situation where there were disparaging, inaccurate comments made by a staff member to their direct supervisors. That email went to a board member. That board member then brought it to my attention so that we could address it.
And I guess I thought we were trying to limit the communication to evaluation and also defamatory comments, like those 2 things.
And I think that the 3 or 4 meetings that we discussed this, probably going back to last November, December, January, and then February approval, and then if my memory is serving me correct, July, August, September of this year, I think we've debated this language, or the committee has debated this language extensively. And if there is a recommendation, I might then ask if it's okay to run that Neola to see if that recommendation has substantially changed the intention of this policy, which would then prevent us from having any sort of support from Neola, because again, there are two legal references on this policy.
Those legal references have been using this kind of wording?
Legal references give the foundation for why we would have a policy that would address communication from an employee to or, in this case, a school board.
That first sentence has two words that I think separate it from the social conversations, and that is the maintaining order. It has a legitimate interest in maintaining order. Now, conversation is getting to the point where it's disturbing order, then it falls to me in one of these other three categories. If it's social conversation at a reception or something like that, I don't see that we're violating maintaining order. I'm very comfortable with this wording.
You're not comfortable?
I am comfortable. Oh, you got a problem?
No, I'm actually comfortable with it. I'm just wondering if there would be, by looking at other districts' policies, if we brought some of those in just to see what other districts are doing.
We did that a few months ago around this, and I believe Mr. Dietz had indicated at one of our last meetings that this language really
Right,
is the
we
most
did do that.
employee-friendly.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
There are some districts that go so far as to state a absolute procedure for an employee to even talk to a board member. Written request to the superintendent to speak to the board president or to speak to a member of the board, and then
And
that
we
has
don't
to be-
want want that.
Correct. So I mean, there are some extremes out there that spell their policy out that way. There are some policies then that closely resemble what we have, which allows day-to-day communication between a staff member and a board member. And I'm included as a staff member in this, but then there are other pieces to this that then make sure that we're following a process when certain topics come up.
Have a motion to take this either way? These two policies have to be voted on again to bring them up for the second reading and
Yeah, I move to approve policy 3112 and 4112 as presented.
seconded. Seconded by Amanda. Further conversation? In this case, I'll take a roll call. Have Lynn take a roll call. Just read the 5 names and we'll say aye or no.
No.
Aye.
Aye?
No.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And the other two policies that would be coming forward for a second reading, if there's no further changes, we don't even have to vote on it, and is that correct? Is the excuse me, payroll authorizations. Quite simply, we deleted the paragraph because they can no longer voluntarily request these different opportunities for their paychecks. It's quite simply, they will receive them, everybody receives them the same way. Everybody okay with that? And the other one is the subject of brochures and flyers, et cetera, materials arriving at the various offices and the need or not need for further distribution of those. Had that presented last week also, yes. Any further questions on that one? Then we can take those for the second reading and approval as they are presented. Okay. Any Other business recommendations for future committee meetings?
Just that we will be working with the various departments on the recommended policy updates from this revision. And we'll be, November, December, January, we'll keep those coming to you. No sooner will we get done with that than we will get another update. And the work will continue. The other part is the guidelines for policies have been with Neola for several weeks now. So you will see those in the next couple of weeks posted to our website. So their work is, we give them the draft form, you see the redlining, you see stuff that's added. They then go through and clean it up to the neat-looking policy that you see on our website. So that work is in progress.
I don't remember where we are with, you raised a question that I had a while back. The dissemination of this online for our staff, is it all done? Can they, not these, but up to this point, is the staff able to access the policies online now?
We have, so just a little bit, kind of a background. In August, we did a administrative update on policies. So Jody, Chris, Darren and I, Steve Schloman, and Todd, we gave an outline to the administration, series by series of what they needed to pay attention to. Just prior to the start of the school year, I sent a memo out in the Connect to the staff, all staff, support staff and our teaching staff on the fact that we did this policy update. I gave them the links to where to go, a little bit of a description of the layout. And then at the end of the second week of school, I sent a letter, email blast out to all families that indicated that we had done a policy, that we did this policy work. And then I provided them the links in that email to go right to the policy pages. So we've communicated with all stakeholders on the policies. The updates are provided in a short memo to staff through the Connect. Chris Hedstrom just does a little summary from each board meeting. And then we've briefly had some conversations around the use of board docs so that we could have everything that we discussed here, which would be approved at a board meeting in draft form, available to the public and to staff before it gets published to the website. So we're looking at expediting that, the turnaround from approval to publish.
Good, thanks for that update. All right, that means we are at the point where we may adjourn. We will have our next board policy meeting on Tuesday, November 21. We stand adjourned. Thank you.